Welcome to our latest episode of 305 Vox Populi here in the town of Miami Lakes. We have a very special guest today. We have Chris Norwood with us. Before we get to Chris, I wanted to thank some of our sponsors. Today, this podcast, every single day, is powered by Miami Lakes Auto Mall. Shout out to Fred Senra. I know Chris and Fred are neighbors. Miami Lakes Auto Mall is located at 16600 Northwest 57th Avenue here in the town of Miami Lakes. You can reach them at 305-455-3540. And our food sponsor today is NQC, No Quiero Cocinar. Shout out to Milo, Tiffany Gonzalez. Thank you guys very much. They're located at 6189 Miami Lakes Drive, America's Gourmet Drive-Thru. Their number is 305-556-4838. They're one of the best operators, restaurant operators in all of Miami-Dade County. They do a fantastic job. Thank you guys very much. And our production team from Matter Lakes Academy. Shout out to the Bears. They do a phenomenal job every single day here in the podcast. So I want to welcome our guest today, Chris Norwood. Chris is a friend for a long time, somebody who's done a great job here in our community, added so much value. This year alone, he's the one that coordinated our Black History video here in our community, had an entire display here in Town Hall. He's done that in the past here in our community. Him and I have spoken before, and I'm like, hey, I'm game. If you want to add value, if you want to share Black history here, this City Hall is a blank canvas to you and whatever you want to do here. I mean, this is your home, and Chris has grabbed the bull by the horns and done that. And I just wanted to thank you for doing that because it's blown people away when they see the art that you bring here to Town Hall. So thank you and welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me, man. So much of the work that I do in Miami-Dade County and South Florida is in urban communities, so it's always great. You know, I live here in Miami Lakes. You know, my friends always tell me I live in Miami Lakes. You know, I don't live in the city of Miami. I work there. I work all over the, South Florida, but I love Miami Lakes, and I've been here for 20 plus years now. But I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, born in a very blue-collar community, a community that was very diverse, although a majority black city, but a very strong Hispanic community, a historic Italian community as well. My father and mother were, they met in college at Virginia Union University, which is another historically black college, started by, as a lot of historically black colleges were actually started by various churches. Almost exclusively, most black colleges. And they met there, they eloped. They, to the dismay of my grandparents, but they eloped. My father was a veteran. He fought in World War II in Asia under MacArthur, I believe. And so in a segregated unit back then. But through the GI Bill, he went to college. He was a little older than my mother because of his military service. But they fell in love, and they headed to Harlem, New York, which for a lot of people, there's the largest migration of people in the history of the world during peacetime was actually black folk, African Americans moving from the south to the north. And it's called America's Great Migration. A lot of black folk, particularly after World War II, moved, and many moved. Migration actually started before then, but as people could not get, because of Jim Crow and things of that nature, as we always say in public policy, people eventually will move with their feet. And so people literally got on trains, and there was this huge exodus of black folk from the south to points north, points Midwest, and to points west. And my parents were one of them. And because there's a Penn Station in New York, and there's also a Penn Station in Newark, a lot of folk who went from the south to the north thought that they landed in New York when they heard Newark Penn Station. Wow. So that's how my parents got there, and my mother worked for the Newark Star Ledger. which is a major newspaper for many years. When I was 13, though, my mother passed away, and then I was fortunate. My family took me in. Extended family took me in. They did not want me involved in the state system. I grew up in a family and in a time, I think, in a community in which we just kind of took care of our own. You didn't allow government to come into your family life to that extent unless you really, really had to. And so I was never technically a foster kid. My cousins in South Jersey and Red Bank, New Jersey, down the shore, took me in for a while, and then I was acting up a little bit, and then I moved in with my best friend's family, and they sort of adopted me, and when I was right after my mom passed away when I was 13, and then I went up to college, and that's where I went to Hampton University, and then went on to graduate school at Cornell University where I studied public policy, and then found myself down here looking for a law school, and came to St. Thomas University Law School, and that's kind of how I got to Miami Lakes. Yeah.
Man, Chris, the adversity that you've had to face and where you're at today, kudos to you, striving through that. I think adversity is such an important thing in everybody's life that you get to see a glimpse of people's souls and what they're all about. So, hearing your story and what you've done, where you went to school, I mean, I'm so impressed with that. I wanted to touch upon a little bit more on your time at Hampton.
Yes, sir.
Because this past year, I'm a big basketball fan, and I've been seeing what's happening with the HBCUs.
Oh, yeah.
When McCord Maker, who was one of the top prospects in the nation, he said, "You know what? Forget about Duke. Forget about North Carolina. All these schools, they all offered him. He was a top 10 player in the nation, and he went to Howard. And how that's changed. And now at Jackson State, you got Deion Sanders, popping,
Wow.
and you have this whole movement. I mean, so I really wanted to touch upon that. I mean, what's going on with
Wow.
HBCUs and all that? I mean, what's happening?
Great question. I just so happen to be the national treasurer of Hampton University's Alumni Association, and so this is near and dear to my heart. Going to a historically black college is a piece of history. I mean, you're connecting, when you look at the history of HBCUs, they came about post the Civil War, mostly started by Northern missionaries in the South. And my school was started by Samuel Armstrong, who was actually a Union general, a general who led a regiment of African-American soldiers. So when you think of Glory, the movie Glory, if you remember that movie, and Matthew Broderick played this captain, I guess, and led a regiment. Samuel Armstrong was kind of like that guy, He actually was from Hawaii, from missionaries that moved to Hawaii or what have you, graduated from Williams College, and then participated in the Union cause, and then found himself in Hampton, Virginia. And Hampton University was founded actually in 1868 officially, but actually was founded during the Civil War unofficially. Once there was a base or still is, Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. African slaves would come to that base during the Civil War. So imagine the war is happening in Virginia, and slaves are traveling from all over to seek refuge with the Union Army. And there was a general there that legally through military law, made them contraband. So he designated them contraband, which means that they were now under his protection. And then a lady actually began to educate them under a tree. And that tree was also the first place that the Emancipation Proclamation was read in the South. That is the centerpiece of our campus, that tree. And so going to a historically black college, so often, we look at it as being something that's separate. No, it's just people embracing their culture. When I went to Hampton University, when I walked into the cafeteria, those ladies that were sitting there, those ladies that were standing there serving was happy to serve us. They thought that we were like their sons, They were proud of us being in college. I mean, they gave us extra whatever we wanted. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a matter of being around people who support you, being around people who kind of understand where you come from. So when I went to graduate school at Cornell, which I think is I think it's a great way to educate a child, is to go to a college where they feel comfortable around people who kind of know where they're coming from, and then go to a majority university. Because when I went to Cornell, I just felt free. I mean, I felt great and felt like I had a great foundation socially as well as educationally that helped me to this day. Going back to your question, yeah, this is great, man, because these athletes are no longer the athletes of yesteryear. They know now with technology, we're sitting here right now on a podcast that can travel the corners of this earth right now if we were live, and tomorrow when it goes, it can reach all those corners of the earth. If you're a great basketball player, through the rec leagues, which are almost like professional rec leagues now,
Yep.
the AAUs, and you're getting seen, you're developing your talent. It's not like when we were probably coming up where you had to go to high school to develop. That's where the best coaches were, that's where the best everything was. Now through AAU and some of the other sort of traveling teams, whatever, these kids are playing each other and developing at rapid paces. High school is way less relevant, and so they're getting exposure, and they now know through social media that they're in power, they're in control, of a lot of their business opportunities and things of that nature. And so, going to college now is about, okay, well, I can go wherever I want to go. I don't have to go to Duke, or I love Duke. My cousin went to Duke, graduated from Duke, and I love Mike Krzyzewski and what he does there. But you don't have to go there or go to North Carolina or go to Boston College or the majority. You can go there if you want to. You don't have to go there because you have to, to get the exposure. And with that being said, this new sort of development of kids rediscovering black colleges, because they've always been there, it reminds me of when I was growing up, when the Cosby Show was on and A Different World was going on. A lot of kids my age rediscovered black colleges then, because everybody wanted to date Lisa Bonet. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to find Lisa Bonet. You know what I'm saying? So it was a resurgence then. It's a resurgence now. It's a beautiful thing. And I think what Dion is doing, there's a crisis in the African American community when it comes to black men and boys. There's a crisis with our families that has been going on for the past 30 years. I think what Dion is showing and putting on full view for everyone to see is that we're going to save somebody through this football program. We know football. Dion, Super Bowl rings, Hall of Famer. I know what football support. I know what excellence in football is supposed to look like. His staff, all NFL talent. So they're bringing that to a historically black college and saying to these young men, you come here, and they're unapologetic. We're going to help you get to the NFL. Like, they're unapologetic about that, and that's what people want to hear, and that's what these kids want to learn. And we're going to make you into men. And all you have to do is look at his two sons that have followed him there. Maybe you saw the interview that these two sons gave.
One of them signed with FAU.
Yeah, that's right.
Then he switched. I was so impressed because you hit on the head. Now, you're not only talking about it, but you're doing it, right? Now your own kid is there. You're going to push him to the NFL, and everybody else is like, wait a second. Not only is Dion there, but he's a believer. His kids are there, Right. So I think that entire atmosphere that he's creating there is going to be fun.
And these were the only places that, when you look at the best African-American college football players at every position to this day, I think it's 50-50 they went to a HBCU. Who's the greatest wide receiver of all time? If Jerry Rice isn't your number one, he's your number two. Right?
No, Jerry Rice is number one. Jerry Rice is number one.
Mississippi Valley State, right? Actually, my uncle helped recruit him because he went to Mississippi Valley State. If you look at the greatest running back ever played the game, if Walter Payton isn't in your top 3, he got to be in your top 5.
All day.
Jackson State University. If you look at the greatest lineman, Deacon Jones, you go back, Michael Strahan on Good Morning America with the Texas Southern. Okay? You can just, it's kind of like that hidden giant. Like, you don't really pay attention, you don't really know, but it's there. The first black Super Bowl champion quarterback, Doug Williams. You know what I'm saying? So Doug went to Grambling, right? So it's there. The history is there, and Jackson State has sent so many NFL players over the years, way back in the day. But when you look at it, it's like the Negro League Baseball. These leagues used to be dynamite, because this was all that they had, and it's very indicative of actually, you can actually cross that over to public policy in some ways, because when black communities were segregated, it forced these communities to really do for themselves. And so in a segregated, and remember when I say segregated, I'm not saying that they were actually segregated, because in actuality, anybody can come into the black community. There's really other communities that were segregated, which is another little pet peeve of mine. But these communities were self-sufficient. In Overtown, where my gallery is, and I'm sure we get to that at some point, there was a doctor's office in the 50s that had 5 black doctors that were not of the same medical office. They just had 5 different medical offices. It would be very interesting to know whether that exists in South Florida today. This was the 1940s, 1950s, 1940s and 50s. So, you had to do for yourself, and you didn't seek anything outside of your community. You had to, by self-preservation. And then through the desegregation, which was the right thing to do, we sort of lost some of that. So with football, with basketball, it's the same thing. Whereas these colleges had to have these players, and now they're coming back because they want to, not because they have to. This is a beautiful thing. Yeah.
So we usually do the show about 30 minutes. Today we're going to go a little bit longer because I want to make sure that we don't lose anything in translation. I'm really fascinated by this, so I'm going to let our producers know we're going to go a little bit longer today. Mm-hmm. But pivoting to your work here in Miami and what you do with your art gallery, and I wanted to touch upon a movie that came out not too long ago, One Night in Miami.
Oh, wow.
Man, you talk about Sam Cooke, X, Ali, Jim Brown. I watched that and I was blown away, and I called Joseph right away. I was like, look, we gotta set up a tour. I want to go check out Hampton House. I want to see what's going. That history, that rich history that exists here. Just that movie it's just a tip of the iceberg.
Right.
And I think what you're doing with your artwork, everything with the gallery, and how you pivoted from your legal career to now working with nonprofits. I mean, just talk to us about what's happening with your gallery, what's happening in the area.
Culture is sometimes viewed as arts and entertainment, but culture really is the soul of a people that dictate what politics are. It's our culture. When you really value your culture, you respect other people's culture. You really do. If you really love and really study your own culture, not just, hey, I eat this and I eat that. No, really study it and really appreciate it. Then, if you like rice and beans, you don't like, well, how do other people make rice and beans? What's the difference? You know what I'm saying? And so I believe that culture is a powerful thing to bridge gaps, right? But in the African American community here in Miami-Dade, you think of the Hampton House. So often we don't know our history. And I think that's where the divide in community happens. And it's okay not to know something, but it's not okay not to want to know something. About 40% of the people who incorporated the city of Miami were African American, mostly Bahamian, who came to this community to build Flagler's Railroad. This is pre-Plessy versus Ferguson. And so black folk were actually voting. They needed their votes in order to incorporate. And then Plessy versus Ferguson actually happened the same year, but the legal effect didn't happen until later on, because those same black folk couldn't vote, the following year. The oldest building still standing in the city of in Miami-Dade, Broward, or Palm Beach counties was built by enslaved Africans. It was called the William English Plantation Longhouse, which was at what later became Fort Dallas Park, which is a small little park right behind the James L. Knight Center on the Miami River. It's still there, small little park. But that used to be a plantation with 100 slaves who built that building. And then in 1925, that building was broken down and moved to Lunas Park, the oldest park in the city of Miami, which is borderlining Overtown. That building is still there. So the oldest still standing building in Miami was built by the artisan hands of enslaved Africans. So it's this sort of history that when you understand that history, it makes you think differently about things. You know what I mean? Because now you understand. Now we can understand the contributions that African Americans have made. One night in Miami, Hampton House, to see these men grapple with some of these issues in a room, it was very powerful. But also, it was very powerful being from Miami. You get to say, like, these people really hung out down here. Muhammad Ali really lived here. Yeah, he owned homes here. Loved South Florida. Sam Cooke, one of the greatest live albums ever made. Was made by Sam Cooke in Overtown at a place called the Harlem Club. If you look that up in Google, the greatest live album, definitely the greatest live soul album, #1 was his album called Live at Harlem Club. There's a lot of history. And that issue, the issues that they were grappling with, particularly Malcolm X and Sam Cooke, those could happen in any community. Once you have success, how do you give back? How do you lift other people up? Or what is success? How do you define success? When you come from communities, when you come from an ethnic community, you feel like you owe something. You know what I mean? You feel like you owe people behind you something. And how people grapple with that is what I think that movie really played out, in a very beautiful way. We were having a conversation earlier about, some of us who grew up in a blue-collar community, when we have kids and we want to transfer those values, what do? They're growing up, high on the hog, you know what I'm saying? And you kind of want to give them those values. And some of my friends, they send their kids to rec leagues in their old neighborhood. Those of them that, if you still go to your same church, you get more involved in your church in your old neighborhood. But it's a difficult, it's kind of that survivor's guilt kind of thing. And it's a struggle. But that movie was awesome. That movie was very awesome.
No, I was blown away. I shared it with everybody. I said, this is a must watch. I mean, you're from Miami, you're from the 305, you have to understand the history, what happened here, because I'm sure there's a lot of folks that drive by that Hampton House, which is preserved now forever, which is phenomenal, and don't know what happened there, what was the history. But you're right, just those conversations that happened in that room. I mean, I was so.
But you probably have a great appreciation for your own culture, and I think that's what I'm saying. You probably really love being from Cuba, or your parents being from Cuba. And so when you really truly love your culture, you can appreciate other people's culture, and you see value. You get understanding of your own. It's that comparison. When I was in law school, one of the ways in which they teach you law is comparative law. You compare other people, other societies, other cultures, other legal systems to your own to help you understand your own better. And I think through art is another way in which that contribution for me happens. I run the historic Ward Rooming House Gallery, which is another historic building in Overtown. That building is owned by the city of Miami, the city of Miami CRA. They've entrusted that building to me over the past 3 years to produce art exhibitions. They made it into a gallery way before I received it. But that building was built in the early 1900s by Shadrach Ward, a black architect from Key West who moved up here, him and his wife. And they built it as a rooming house to house African Americans, mostly Bahamians who came here to work on the railroad, needed a place temporarily before they either found their relatives or moved into somewhere more permanent. it was also utilized by a lot of rural African Americans who were coming from way inland who needed a place to rest their head as they were doing business downtown. It was the only place. This is pre-1940s, 1950s Miami, the so-called heyday of Overtown, which, you know, or the 1960s for that matter, which was depicted in One Night in Miami. This is in the 1920s, you know. And so Shadrach Ward built that building. It maintained itself over a very long period of time. You know, it actually, the wards are related to Oscar Brainerd, Senator Oscar Brainerd's family.
Small world.
Yeah, and so that building in about around 2010, I think the city bought it and rehabbed it, put $1 million into making it an art gallery, and I've been able to, over the past 3 years, conduct, you know, every 3 months, a new exhibition, and my focus is mostly on African American, historic African American art. And so it doesn't, to a lot of my friends, it doesn't really, how did I go from here to there? And it all makes sense to me, you know. I feel, you know, art, culture, politics, it all makes sense to me. And I've been able to bridge that in some creative way, I think.
No, you're telling a story, and more importantly, on the public policy side, if you're able to visualize it, you not only change minds, you change hearts.
Yes.
Overall, and the understanding and folks getting together, which is so important. I know you have an artist that blew me away that I think they use leaves. Was it leaves?
Yes.
I mean, when I saw that piece, that's the story. It's not only what's on there, but just the background of just getting that all together and how. I mean, I was
Marvin Weeks. He's a very powerful artist. I tell people he's the only man in my bedroom is his artwork, you know, on my walls. He is, you know, that technique that he uses with the leaves to actually use the resin for the leaves to make paint as well. But to take those leaves and create designs and create art through it. In fact, the Emancipation Oak that I described to you at Hampton University, I commissioned him to do a piece depicting that tree. And I got my old college roommate to go to the Emancipation Oak and get some leaves that had fallen from it. He mailed them to me. And then Marvin was able to use those leaves to make this piece of art on an 4x8 piece of wood. He made this almost lifelike impression of this very real historic tree. So, you know, Marvin and just the work that people do, that craftsmanship, I think is very powerful that people can relate to.
And one of the most powerful things you've said today that's probably going to stick with me forever is when you talked about how folks need to embrace their own culture, right? Understand it, not just
right.
You know, like you said, rice and beans for me is a staple every day, but understanding, you know, how it's different in every single place. And you know, last week I was in with the political prisoners, former political prisoners from Cuba, and we were talking. But I've embraced it, so it makes it easier for me to work with everybody else and understand. But everybody kind of needs to do that, and I think.
Right.
From now on, and that's something that's always going to stick in the back of my mind. So I really appreciate you hitting
Culture.
on
Culture
that.
is important. I mean, you know, years ago I used to chair the Youth Activities Task Force, and you know, I created. It's funny. I created a breakdancing competition here that we would do every quarter, and I wanted to show kids here who really loved hip hop. I wanted to show, I was like, well, let me show you real hip hop. And so what we did was we created a b-boy competition, a real b-boy competition, so they could see the five, you know, there's 5 elements of hip hop. There's breakdancing, DJing, MCing, graffiti, and the knowledge of it all, right? And so breakdancing is one of the elements. I wanted to really show them that aspect, dance, in the context of what it really was like to have a b-boy competition. So what we would do is a couple of times we actually did it right on Main Street. We brought a wooden dance floor out there. I partnered with a very respected group of producers who produce these sort of events. And we put cash prize, it was like $500 in cash prizes, so that people, b-boys from all over Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami would want to come here and compete. And so people actually got to see a real, because it was money on the line, you know. And I got the mayor at the time to was a couple of council people to be a judge. I got Mary Collins. Mary Collins was my judge. You know what I'm saying? So, but you know, that culture really, you know, it's just not about, you know, just participate. Like, no, let's teach them what this is, because if they really understand what this is, they will appreciate it more and help them appreciate culture. And I sincerely believe, especially for young kids, this is how you make money in 2021. You make money in 2021 by your ability to understand people in a quick way. You know, my neighbor Fred Sinra is the sponsor of this show, Miami Lakes Auto Mall. If you're selling cars at that location, your ability to connect with someone is going to help you make money. You know, so no matter what you do, your ability to be a better politician is your ability to connect with people quickly. You know, and so this is how, you know, there used to be a time where being a bigot helped you make more money. You know what I mean? I believe those times are over. You know, I think it's our ability to connect, and I think you can do that through art and culture when you're able to see things. And it's not about you see what I want you to see. What do you see? You know, and can you look at a painting and really decipher what is being said? The more you're able to do that, the more you're able to see a person and connect with that person. And no matter what field that you are, we're all trying to make money. We're all trying to relate. If I travel the world and I meet somebody in a store that's from China and I'm able to say, hey man, I was in Shanghai 2 years ago, you know, it was great over there. You know, that person is instantly connected with me. So it's not just about these things on a philosophical level. I believe this is how we live in a culture economy. And so we want to sell products to everybody. You know, you want everybody to feel welcome in Miami Lakes. And so I think art and politics are more connected than people really give it credit.
Man, I really appreciate it, Chris. One of the reasons we usually do the show, it's about 30 minutes. Today we went a lot longer just because of the value and how deep the conversation went. And I think these types of conversation need to happen more often, because what you're doing is truly remarkable. Your story and telling that story to the folks that are going to be watching, I really appreciate that, and I'm sure it inspires folks. I mean, going from the situation you went with your family and all that, you know, striving, becoming an attorney, going to Cornell, going to Hampton, and doing everything that you've done, coming to St. Thomas. I mean, that's just remarkable, and how you keep going. You know, you keep moving forward, and I'm truly blown away. I know we got to wrap up, but I want to ask, you got anything for me? Any questions for me? Or
so how do you make your eggs at the Mayor's Cafe?
Listen, but believe it or not, I've had to learn the hard way. So now on Monday I had to cook. So I know how to cook sunny side up, over easy, over medium, over hard, country scramble. I didn't even know that existed. I mean, they had to, somebody asked for it, and I had to like Google it and learn. And one of my cooks knew. So yeah, there's so many different ways. That's a great question, because there's so many different ways to make eggs and so many ways to mess it up. The first couple times that I made them, folks were sending back, it's like, listen, this is supposed to be over easy, it's over medium, and I was like, man, what? I don't know the difference, you know. But now I'm an expert, so
that's my plug of your restaurant to your listeners.
I appreciate
it's on me, not nobody else.
I appreciate that, Chris, and thank you very much for everything that you do. I look forward to keep continuing working together.
Absolutely.
Because
whatever the town needs of me, I'm here.
I really appreciate that. I look forward to putting out the podcast, folks watching it, and being inspired by your story. I think it's inspirational, motivational, and not only that, how deep you go into these conversations to bring people together. I think we need more of that. So just wanted to thank you.
Thank you
for everything that you do. So
all right.
We'll see you guys next week. Tune in on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Take care. And 305 Vox Populi will be right back every single Wednesday.